Hi everybody, a beautiful sunny day. Been asked by a few people to discuss membership in our nation or any other nation, how we'll go about it. There's kind of a protocol that's been developed because of I would say the interference of the government in regards to who's a Métis, who's not a Métis. But generally speaking, for your own, I would say, lack for a better word, pleasure, whatever, you should know where you come from. And that you have to do some genealogical research, or DNA research. The government of Canada doesn't like to look at DNA because DNA will prove that you're Aboriginal if it has Aboriginal genes, but if it shows up that you don't have Aboriginal genes, well, they're only looking at 10% of the whole genome anyhow, so they're probably missing half the stuff. So the fact that your DNA doesn't show that you're Aboriginal doesn't mean that you're not, because under the mitochondrial DNA, there's the X, there's A, B, C, and D, and X. X is a newer one that they found that's predominant in the Anishinaabe people. It goes all the way out west, and there are X's in the Hopi, either the Navajo or Hopi, I forget. There's X's out there as well. And Kinnikwik man, which was that 9,000-year-old skeleton they found that finally got reburied under the Reparations Act of the United States. He was an X mitochondrial DNA related into the Kovo band. So X is predominant in the Anishinaabe people, all the way from the East Coast all the way out to the West. So DNA is very hard. It's an interpretive science. It's developing really fast. They also found North American Aboriginals have more Neanderthal genetics than anyone else in the world, and that goes with our belief of the Solutrean people that populated Eastern Canada, the United States, back 20 to 40,000 years ago on the ice sheet that went from the Solutrean Valley all the way over to North America. Sorry, still got the cold. Canada, eh? So anyhow, when you're doing your research to apply to various groups, they want to show that you have a connection not only in blood, but in association to local communities. And the recent announcement that Métis National Homeland is going through their files to see who is actually from the Métis National Homeland, which they just posted the picture again, which is west of Dryden, the old Ontario-Manitoba border. So, you know, there are different specific membership criteria to be for which group you may or may not want to join, and whether or not they're surrendered or unsurrendered. So these are things you'll have to consider. Anyhow, we work extensively with the Ontario Métis Family Records. That's omfrc.org. They do genealogical research and compare your documents that you have with a massive database. We have our own database here in our own community. As I mentioned in another video, my sister and father did an extensive genealogical research of our family, and that's quite extensive. It's a huge database. There are the Morin CDs from out west. There's the Douin, and there's a couple of historical French Canadian. There's the Bibliothèque Nationale du Québec, was got incredible amount of records, and then all the church records from Quebec have now been, I think they've, at McGill University now has the total database of all the French records that they've collected from all the churches in Quebec. And then one of my cousins works with the Mormon outfit, family, ancestry.org or whatever, which is the Mormon church. They have incredible databases there. French Canadian. My cousin actually went to all the churches in Quebec to read the records. So there are a lot of records out on Aboriginal ancestries, and it would be good, it's really important to hook into those record systems to get the paperwork on your family, because it's really important to know who your family was. And a lot of groups require your genealogical records, your birth certificates, photographs to prove who you are, that it relates to the records, and you can prove your birth certificate, driver's license, so you can prove who you are before you get a membership card or a citizen card or a national card or a registry card, whatever terminology the different groups work. So do your family records, ask all the current relatives that you know that are still alive to get as much information you can from your own elders. It's kind of a mission of quest of your identity. So there's different ways to do it, but most groups look at your genealogy. Some groups will do an adoption process, and we have adopted into our nation individuals who can't prove, because a lot of records are missing, and they know that, well, you know, not to use color as indicative, but I know some community members that we've adopted in. They were adopted through the Ontario government, through Children Aid. They're obviously Aboriginal, but there's no records for them, right? And that's been a problem in the past. So it's really up to the community to decide. Now, see, adoptions under the Indian Act are totally legal under the Indian Act. They don't tell you about that. It's not. But adoptions are allowed, and adoptions of one adult adopting another adult is totally allowable. And that is part of our Aboriginal customs and traditions, are equal in the law as the Western law, which is the right. There are customs in our traditions. Our laws are our laws. And if you're not surrendered like our nation, our laws are absolute. Of course, the government doesn't want to acknowledge that. So we use the Ontario Métis Family Records Centre. They are one of our relational groups. We're related to them. My family's related to them. And they have the Red Feather tribe. They're unsurrendered as well. Our website, where we're starting to post our membership criteria, which will be up and running by the 1st of January. We've had major problems with the backlog and the printers malfunctioning, electronics and digital stuff. So ours is Anishinaabe-Tsleil-Waututh.com. I'll ask the other chief who's posting this how to put that down on the underside when you pop up the video. So generally speaking, most groups want to have your genealogy. Some groups will accept your DNA, which some people get their DNA back and they've got a high percentage of DNA that shows that they're Aboriginal, like a parent or a grandparent or 3 or 4 generations back. It doesn't say where you come from, which Aboriginal community, but our philosophical belief is we're all brothers and sisters. So it really doesn't matter from Turtle Island, which tribe you come from, because we adopted people into our nations all the time. That was how you increase the genetic variability. So we, weren't all becoming inbred. And we adopted, which is well established in the historical record, many Aboriginal people. My grandfather was John Nicolay. Before he married the Huron-Nipissing woman, the daughter of the storyteller, he was adopted as a full war chief of the Algonquin Nation. So is he Native? Well, yes, he's Native. He was adopted. Daniel Boone was adopted. There's all kinds of references in North America of adoption of colonials into the Native communities. And of course, with the escaped slaves, both in Canada, because we had slavery up until the late 1800s, believe it or not, and the United States slaves, they were adopted right away into communities. Michigan had a lot of runaway slaves from the southern United States that were adopted into the Chippewa nations, etc., etc. So, everybody has a different story, and it would be really nice that everybody knows their story as best as they can. Now, if they can't find any records, a lot of groups, including ours, will accept adoption into the community. But they have to prove why. There has to be some proof, some substance of why you're going to join or want to join our nation. Did you take a degree in Aboriginal studies? You're really in tune with the Earth Mother. You want to protect the environment. You're a naturalist. You want to protect nature. You really love the philosophies of the spiritual nature of our spirituality. You know, if you document them and put a proposal, the clan mothers, the women councils, will review that and decide whether or not they can officially adopt you into the nation. And we do have adoption ceremonies, which are totally legal. And in Aboriginal customs and traditions, the Grand Chief, which would be me, or the clan mother, adopt those people into our clan, you know, so they have a clan affiliation, right? So we look after our people. So whatever your reason to join, if you can't prove that you're an Aboriginal, an explanation, I don't want to say a doctoral thesis, but just some kind of documentation of why and what you're going to bring to the nation, why it's an advantage to the nation to adopt you into that nation. So there are different groups that will do adoptions of good people who want to advance the rights of Indigenous people. Now, our philosophy is that if we wait a long time, everybody in Canada will be Aboriginal because we have large population base, we have a lot of children, and those children have to marry someone. And we marry a lot of non-Aboriginals. I think in my personal family, I think we got most of the major, if you want to use the word races, or ethnic groups have been married into our family. So their children become Métis. Okay, so, you know, it's not an easy issue, but if you have an Aboriginal ancestor, you can prove it. That's really good. Bring the documents and submit them. So for the Anishinaabe, Salutri, Métis, there'll be a better description of that and hard print of what you need, but it's basically who your ancestors were. Prove that you're Aboriginal. If you can't prove you're Aboriginal because you were adopted, you know you're Aboriginal, but there's no records because you're adopted into a colonial family, just identify that. And I believe there is a process now where you can get your adoption records. There were a couple of Supreme Court decisions, but I haven't been involved in that for a while, so I forget the current status. So if you want to become a member of our nation, because we're in constitutional challenges as a nation, we are signing international treaties and have done so with other Indigenous nations around the world, and we're in the formal treaty negotiation process, registered with the United Nations. So we may have something that you are desirous to have, some concrete association with a significant entity that's working on Indigenous rights. Or you can join one of the other groups. Totally up to you. But that's basically in a nutshell, the application process to recommit to your Aboriginal heritage, your Aboriginal communities. And I know I have thousands and thousands of fairly close relatives that are eligible to be members of our nation, but have yet got their card, right? The government likes to see a card, right? If you are doing something to go to university and they say, well, you're a member of Métis Nation, well, we can't let you in under an Aboriginal or whatever. There's all kinds of issues, and it all relates to funding. And if they don't accept you and you've got a card from whether it's our Métis community or other Métis communities, and then again, that's another human rights violation. Not that we want to fight all these issues, but they are out there because the government is trying to restrict Aboriginal membership. And to validate that statement, when the new First Nation of Micmac in Newfoundland was created a few years ago, they expected maybe 20,000 membership, and then the government cut off the membership entrance requirement because they were creeping up to 200,000 or more, right, of Métis who could trace their ancestry to Newfoundland. And so that's what they're afraid of, because if you become a surrendered Indian under the Indian Act, the federal government has a whole bunch of financial commitments that they have to do to that new First Nation, like the one in Newfoundland, and if there's any others. And there are a few other groups that have been vying to become Indians under the Indian Act for a long time. And they're part of the Indian land claim process. But they're classing themselves as Indians. Now we're all Indians, but we're classing ourselves as Métis, that the government's now calling us Indians. So there's going to be a lot of changes, and I have no really capability to talk about that right now because it's all in flux. So we're Métis, they consider us Indians. I don't know if that makes us now, to simplify their process, we have to go under the Indian land claims process, and there's 407 plus current claims into the Indian land claim process, which will take about another 200 years, because they're only doing 2 land claims a year. So that's another 200 years before all these land claims, and we'll be after that. So we've taken the different attack that no, it's nation to nation as a requirement under the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, and we've already filed February 11, 2009 to the United Nations under the Treaty Handbook Protocol under simple signature. So complicated, tried to decomplicate it, but put your stuff together, select your community that you want to join, or your political lobbyist group that you want to join. They'll all want a picture, document to prove who you are. Birth certificates, some of them get really anal retentive for birth certificates and baptismal certificates and marriage certificates. They're duplicating, I don't know, whatever policy, but some of them are very anal retentive, and that's no disrespect, but it's based on, I would assume, their funding mechanism, right? So, easy or not easy, but we can work with the process. So, have a great day. Bo Mapi.